Yo, what is up, everyone? Today, we are doing What If Ichigo Was Like the Riddler, and, spoilers for the Thousand Year Blood War arc, Spirits Are Forever With You light novels, and the Can't Fear Your Own World novels. Also, with the new Batman movie that has just recently been premiered into theaters earlier last week. So, yeah, now we shall do What If Ichigo had not carried on, but had a similar mindset to that of the Riddler. And if you're wondering why would I do what ifs on something so minuscule as idealism, and I say to that, it's not minuscule, because like we're basically changing all of Bleach. Like, it's not even just Ichigo having his idealism, just changing where he's raised and what he does in a sense. So yeah, this is gonna be different because idealism is legit your personality, pretty much the reason why you do the actions that you do, right? So without further ado, guys, sit back, relax, enjoy.
Bring that heat, boy.
We start this what if a few years before Ichigo was born. Now, what would happen is, after the events of the everything but the rain, we're gonna be changing things from Ishin, pretty much living in the world of the world of the living. So what would occur is, just in general, and this is actually gonna be pretty hard because we have to have Masaki live, have Ishin have his powers, plus have Ichigo kind of live. And honestly, now that I think about it, the only real difference I would make is, I guess, Aizen's plans here. But other than that, now that I truly think about it, I wouldn't really change anything here. So we now time skip to the day of when Ichigo is 9 years old, on the fateful day when Yuha uses his Ashwaulen, as Ichigo would be walking back from the dojo with his mom, and in which the Ashwaulen would be activated. Obviously, just by some coincidence, the Grand Fisher would be nearby, as in this time, not just Masaki would die, but so would Ichigo. Obviously, Masaki would die because she would be absorbed by Yuha, but Ichigo would pass on to the Soul Society. But something weird would occur once that would happen, since Ichigo is sort of, due to his hybrid state and the fact that usually normal souls that don't have any sort of spiritual pressure would pass on to the next life. Obviously, Ichigo or something would happen. It's sort of like an anomaly, as Ichigo would be sent back, sort of like, how do I say, 150 years back. Not even, I don't even know if you'd say 150 years, maybe 250 years, somewhere around there, as Ichigo would be born in a sort of alternate timeline. Obviously, why we're having this is because it would make sense for the character's personality traits to be malleable, and it wouldn't affect any plot holes or any possible plot holes that would exist if we were to kind of portray anything that were to happen afterwards. But sort of this timeline would be malleable, so it would kind of be easy for me to change it without it having much repercussions or plot holes. But what I'm gonna be having here is some of the characters would actually be born in Soul Society, or they would go over to Soul Society. One is Ichigo and Orihime. The next is some of the clans from the world of living would ask for asylum to Soul Society, so some of the people wouldn't really, how do I say, in a sense, wouldn't be killed during that 200-year that conflict. So they would go to Soul Society. They would say that they're announcing their affiliation with Yuwatch, and by proving this, they kind of say that, hey, you know, we'll fight for you, and we'll even like live amongst yourself in this land to prove that we can be in similar status, I guess you can say. Not status, but like status when it comes to like purifying souls or hollows and sending souls to a Soul Society, right? And continuing the transmigration system. As Ichigo a few years later would be born, obviously similar parents, right? All the right, same parents, right? And if you're wondering, the Quincy's, how would they be able to fight, since they don't really purify in a sense? They kind of like Yuwatch absorbs anyone they defeat in a sense. And I would say Urahara and Maruri would come up with a system similar to how those black pills that kind of stop the Quincy from using the other people's Bankais, like how Toshiro got his Bankai back, and how Soifon and the others got their Bankai back that were stolen. It's kind of a similar thing here, as what would happen is they would separate their connection between the Quincy's and Yuwatch, as then the Quincy's themselves would start training themselves in order to actually purify souls, in a sense. And that they would kind of train, in a sense, to become their own sort of division in the Gote, in a sense. I mean, they could all join other, you know, divisions and stuff, but I guess there was a little small difference between Shinigami and Quincy, but it was unrecognizable. As obviously Ichigo would be born along with Orihime, and I guess we can say Ichigo would kind of be sort of like born a little few, I'd say like 20 years, 25 years before the turn back the pendulum arc, as Ichigo would be living with his family, like the Shiba family, like Kukaku, Kaien, Ishin, Masaki, and Ganju. Same with the two gate guards. Obviously, I'm not really going to be implicating Yuzu or Karin here. It just doesn't make sense for the type of plot I'm doing here, so yeah. And Ichigo would be growing up, in which one day the Sonayushiro family would be meeting with Byakuya's father, which I don't believe he's named. I actually don't know if he's stated to have a name, but what would happen is, when the Kuchiki's relationship, right, with the Sonayushiros, they basically work for the Sonayushiros in a sense, right? And they saw Ishin and Masaki to be sort of thwarting way in their plans, right? Because Ishin was the 10th squad captain, and obviously, he felt threatened by them. So, what's his name? Tokinada's father would ask Sanjuro, Byakuya's father, to kill Masaki and Ishin, right? And then it would just, because they were sort of a threat to their plans, right? Tokinada wants Hikone to be the Soul King, and obviously the Ishin family, right? Their ancestor was possibly the strongest ever, and Ishin being from this family and having access to the final Getsuga Tensho, he's very threatening. Same with his Bankai. So they would kind of attack him, similar, like being able to assassinate him similarly as, not similarly, but like they use the same strategy as Aizen did. Injure him so he can't use Bankai. But Masaki was also pretty strong, right? She should be able to hold her own. She easily beat White, who was like at least captain's maybe even a little more than captain strength. But obviously, Sanju himself was trained by Ginrei, who was the sixth captain, and possibly trained by Shonsui, Ukutake, and Yamamoto himself. Obviously, because Ginrei and Yamamoto are pretty good friends in the Zanpakuto Rebellion arc. This is kind of built upon a little more further and mentioned. So, obviously, they would assassinate Ichigo's parents, like, not really right in front of him, like, for example, like Bruce. No, it's just they were assassinated, in which, I mean, nothing really would change with the status of Ichigo, other than the fact he's now kind of an orphan, but he obviously still live at the Shiba household, right? And as you know, the Shiba household is actually, it's not really stated where it is, right? Because the places that Kokaku is living in is at the Shiba household. So, due to the loss of Ishin, they'd be given money in order to basically leave, in a sense, because Ishin was dead, and now Masaki was not a Shiba, and like the bloodline was sort of tainted, and the fact that Tokinada's father specifically did not want the Shiba clan to continue. So now the Shiba clan was exiled from the history books, in a sense. So instead of the five great noble clans, it was the four great noble clans. As now this was just a small part of the Sunayusho's plan, or not plan, but prevention from anyone as strong as the Soul King. So now Ichigo is raised in the outer parts of the West Rukon district. As what would happen is, one day he'd be, I guess when it comes to Soul Age, you wouldn't really know. So I'd say he'd be around like 10. So he'd be walking around, in which he had gotten lost into the bad districts of the Soul Society. Obviously, he was then proceeded to be surrounded by, I guess, delinquents. Not delinquents, more like hooligans, like goons, who were like shaking him down, in a sense, right? And obviously, right before that would happen, somebody would cut them down. Not cut them down like killing them, but like sort of injuring them to knocking them out, in a sense. As Ichigo would see the person being Urahara Kisuke, as then this will lead to the sort of uncle relationship between Ichigo and Urahara, as this would be sort of like Urahara is like the Alfred of Ichigo, and Ichigo's like Bruce, right? Urahara this would start the process where Urahara would train Ichigo as with Zanjutsu, Kido, Ho-Ho, and Hakuda. Not really him like getting Shikai or anything, just having the Asushi and him trying to bond with it and gain more powers, right? And later on in the story, there'll be more discovery with the Hollow and Quincy abilities, right? So throughout the years, he would go to the academy, as he would meet new people, right? He would meet, Renji, Rukia, Orihime, and Izuru, as they'd kind of formed their own kind of friend group, as they would fly past the academy, as obviously Rukia would end her graduate early because she joined the Kuchiki clan. She was adopted by the Kuchiki, right? And what would happen is Ichigo would graduate about 2 years after he had joined, while the others had went through the similar process, like the other students, 6 years, right? So after Ichigo had graduated, he had joined the 6th division. Yes, the division led by Byakuya Kuchiki. First, not at that time, but obviously it was Ginrei and Byakuya was the lieutenant at that time, right? While Ichigo had joined, he had been greeted by Ginrei as then, Ichigo would settle in, becoming a 5th seat as he would rise through the ranks from up to 5th seat. As one day they would be going on a mission, or at least they had gotten back from a mission, when he would hear that Byakuya had challenged Ginrei to a death battle for the captaincy. As obviously Ichigo was surprised at this, since this was his grandfather he was challenging, right? He was trying to, he legit was, if he was stronger, he was gonna kill his grandfather. So he had went over to the stands in which everyone was watching, and obviously Ginrei lost, right? Byakuya stated to Ichigo in the canon, right, that he only used Senkei on 2 people, and he is the second. So let's say for sure that it was Ginrei he had used Senkei on, right? And that's what led to him being killed. And from everyone's perspective, Byakuya was kind of, in a sense, immoral for that, because he had legit just killed his grandfather simply for a position higher in the Gotei 13, right? So after this, he would then walk over to his corpse before picking up the Hayori, before then walking off. As now Byakuya would be known as the second person who, out of the 11th division, who had killed their previous captain. No other captain out of the 11th division had killed their previous captain. As Ichigo would kind of be a little mad. Not mad, he would be kind of furious in a sense. Because, in a sense, Ginrei was his sort of superior. And, I guess Shinigami in a division, they respect their captain. And he sees Byakuya, someone who doesn't have any moral code. Or at least to him, he has no moral code. Just, kill him pretty much. Which he despised. He despised Byakuya. This is what started this. I guess not. It's not really despising him, but he just didn't really respect him in a sense. So Ichigo would be, later on, a few years later, would be made the lieutenant, as they would be going on a mission to the world of the living. Ichigo had received his Shikai, being the dual wield that we all know and love. As a few months before that, he would meet his Zanbakuto, Zangetsu, White Zangetsu, and Old Man Zangetsu. As he would sort of have a similar acceptance of, or I guess an acceptance that only he would know in a sense. Everyone always thought that Zanbakutos were just manifestations, right? They weren't actually a piece, literally your soul, right? Everyone treated their Zanbakuto as if they were a separate being, right? Shunsui with Katen Kyokatsu, Shuhei with Kazashini, Shinji with Sakanade, similar things like that, right? We never see Shinji using Bankai with his hollow mask, right? That never happens, because of their perception of what a Zanpakuto is affects their actual Zanpakuto, because as we know, your feelings, your personality affects the Zanpakuto, what it is. And for example, if your resolve is not hardened, that sounded sus, but if your resolve isn't at its most, your blade will dull, and that's kind of partly why Byakuya had lost to Ichigo, because he was having inner conflict, which dulled his blade. As now Ichigo and Byakuya would be going on a kind of duo mission in the world of the living. They were hunting down the Grand Fisher, right? Now this wasn't Grand Fisher in his prime. This was more like an early Grand Fisher, as they would go over to Soul Society through the Senkai Moon Gate. As Byakuya and Ichigo didn't really speak to each other, as Ichigo would question Byakuya how was Rukia's, days in the 13th division, since he couldn't really talk to her. He was busy with his own duties in the 6th division, and he hadn't talked to her since a few months after she had graduated from the academy prematurely, or earlier in a sense. So Byakuya would then say she was doing fine, but I wish she had a seat, like a seated position in the 13th division. A seated position, and that was so weird. That felt like I said position twice or division twice, but then they simply just had the same suffix. I think it was suffix. That's the term. The ending, position. Never mind. That was a weird tangent. So they would make it to the end of the Senkaimon gates, as they would make it over to where the hollow was last spotted. Once they would get there, they would see the Grand Fissure, as suddenly he would distract Byakuya by kind of summoning a manifestation, like a illusion of his previous wife. Why can't I remember her name? I don't understand why, but for some reason I don't remember characters who weren't mainly shown a lot. But this would kind of distract Byakuya, as the Grand Fissure would go to slice his hand down to cut Byakuya down with just his Ryatsu, like kind of covering his hand. So Ichigo would kind of come in between them, kind of blocking the hand, telling Byakuya to like come to his senses, since like he had seen the illusion too, right? So he had told him that it's not like real. So Byakuya would release his Shikai, due to obviously he wasn't going to release it now, but now it was personal. So he would release his Shikai, scatter Senmon Sakura, as then he would injure the hollow, as the Grand Fissure would retreat. As now this would lead to a kind of successful part of the mission, as Grand Fissure would go back to Waka Mundo and kind of gather his Ryatsu again, and before coming back to challenge them, or go back to eat souls. So Byakuya would thank Ichigo in a way, but not like how I'm saying, like, thank you. Nah, it was sort of like a noble way of saying it, the Byakuya way, if you get my feeling in a sense. As Ichigo would question, as I was saying, Ichigo would question Byakuya, why does this person look like Rukia? As then, or obviously this was after he had asked who this is, and then he would ask, why does Hisana look like Rukia? And then he would answer saying that they were related by blood. Then that would, that's all he would say before he would open the Senkaimon, as that would be the end of the mission. As we kind of do a time skip a little bit after Ichigo had finished, I guess, his duties that day. He had went over to a certain part of the district, in which he had walked into a bakery, in which this was actually Orihime's. And if you're wondering, wasn't Orihime in the academy? And you would be right? But right before she graduates, after she graduates, she didn't join the Gote 13. Like, a little bit before, she just not dropped out, but something similar to that, and started up her own bakery. As, obviously, as you can see, Orihime just is, I think she mentions doing that. I remember in chapter 239, she mentions opening a bakery, possibly, and also her taste in general, and obviously it'd be a pretty good store per se, due to her interesting red bean paste. I'm not even gonna go into that. Okay. Basically, what would happen is once Ichigo would get there, he would see Orihime. Now, for the last few years, Ichigo and Orihime were in, I guess, in a relationship per se. I don't know what else to say. But Orihime would tell Ichigo that she had kind of had some problems with the Sanaishiro clan, because obviously the Sanaishiro clan wants to spread their land, right? Try to take all of Soul Society whilst becoming Soul King. And obviously, as we know, Tokinada's plan is to have the Soul Palace be the world of the living. He wanted to tell the humans that there's a Soul Society, so that people, it would spread chaos, right? People who wouldn't have enough huge crimes, and that human world could just commit suicide, so they can know they can go to Soul Society. It's similar to how Joker is, right? Joker knows, in the comic specifically, he knows that he's in a comic and that he doesn't have much accountability, so he just does whatever he wants. He isn't insane, he's hyper sane in a sense. So yeah, a weird comparison, but it is what it is. So Ichigo would realize the kind of debt he's in specifically, and he doesn't have much money due to the fact that Kakakushibo had kind of used her, or I don't know why I said she, like the full name, but Kakaku had used the funds to like get them a new place recently, and other necessities. So Ichigo would start reaching out, for kind of jobs, and he would become like a fixer per se, right? He would do odd jobs, not odd jobs, like, sort of like fixers and watchdogs. They would do odd jobs like tailing, intel missions, things like that. As then he'd be asked to do a job by a suspicious man, yet didn't see their face, right? They were under the kind of a black cloak, being, as we know, it's a Ryatsu concealing cloak, or as I know specifically. He would be asked outside of the Serite walls, as once they would uncover themselves, it would be none other than Sosuke Aizen and, Tozen, Kaname Tozen to be more specific. As then he would question why are they, doing this. As then Aizen would explain to Ichigo that he has a plan to attain a place so great that it could fulfill your needs and all of our needs and the world's needs. As Ichigo would question him, for kind of a further detail, right? As Ichigo would say if he ever heard about the Soul King. As then Ichigo then say what everyone has been taught about the Soul King, right? He's the linchpin, he's the thing that holds the universe together. As then Aizen would say, yes, that's very correct, but there's one thing missing. If someone as potent as the Soul King were to come and, let's say, absorb him, they would become the next Soul King without the whole universe, collapsing. And that's what I want to accomplish. As then he would tell Ichigo about kind of the flaws in Soul Society and its socialism status. Not socialism, in its social statuses, right? The Central 46, Mayuri Kuretsuchi, and other people who are just as horrible as him. As then Aizen would tell Ichigo that the Gote 13 weren't honorable at all. Even since the start, the first 13 captains were just criminals. The only difference from them and actual criminals are the title itself. As then he would start to explain this for with more detail and be more specific in general. As Ichigo would be told by Tozen that he has a mission to follow Urahara and pretty much, in a sense, get their location, right? Because what they want is because they know Urahara's gonna come after Aizen, right? Or save the Vizards, to be more specific. And if they can have a more detailed way of seeing where he is at the time, because this is the only person that suspects Aizen or has that much, intelligence to suspect Aizen, they want to know where he is at all times. As then, obviously Tozen would kind of start to resonate with Ichigo in a sense, because they have to convince him in a sense, right? So he would tell Ichigo about his friend who was killed by Tokinada, and obviously since Ichigo's parents were killed by Tokinada's not father himself, but like ordered in a sense, it would be kind of a similarity in a sense. Tozen would go out about him being justice in a sense, or his justice idealism, as then Ichigo would kind of in a sense reach like the Riddler's idealism, right? He would then say like, if you're justice, and this is a specific quote, I think a quote from straight the movie itself. It says, if you are justice, then please do not lie, right? As then obviously it's a rhetorical statement in a sense. He's kind of just stating this for trying to reach a point in a sense, right? As Tozen would tell him like the time and the dates as he'd be given the money, right? I'll go into US currencies. It's pretty simple, but it'd be whatever currency they have. So he would then say 50 right now and 50 when we finish. And when I mean 50, I mean 50k. Pretty simple. So then what would happen is, Ichigo would nod his head before this would kind of start line of missions he'd be given by Aizen and Tozen, right? As after this mission, obviously he was the one that gave info that Urahara is going after Aizen. Obviously Aizen acted surprised whenever Urahara went to go attack him with his Shikai, but he knew Urahara was coming maybe 10-20 minutes before he actually came, so he was obviously prepared. As then Urahara would be framed. As if you're wondering, how did everyone know exactly where Urahara was and why to arrest him? This time it wasn't Aizen that told him, it was Ichigo. Ichigo seemed like the noble person that would report any crime if he had seen it, and he was at that time the lieutenant of the 6th Squad. And due to this, he would report it to Central 46. Same with Aizen. There's some corroborating statements, right? It would be more believable. So after this, Urahara would flee to the world of the living, in which this would start their own kind of journey in a sense. As now after the incident, Mayuri would become captain. This was as Ichigo would keep an eye on him, because he truly did not like Mayuri at all. He actually researched Mayuri while he was in the Maggot's Nest, and he actually after the disappearance, after the betrayal, right? Obviously Ichigo would still be lieutenant, and he would tell his captain to object, Mayuri being the next captain, and obviously he would try to tell Aizen this, and Gin and Tozen. Obviously Aizen would, assure Ichigo that he'd be able to, in a sense, end Mayuri later on, right? So now what would happen is they would continue their, dealings, right? Ichigo would work with them, as then obviously later on they would kind of pay Ichigo not permanently, full-time in a sense, as he'd do missions for them. As later on what would happen is Ichigo would be given the task. He'd be allowed to, in a sense, kill Mayuri, right? He'd be given the Ryatsu concealing cloak, as he would then expose Mayuri. He would send photos and videos out to the public itself. There was a sort of, if you're wondering how do all the citizens just follow Central 46 without any question, there was a sort of media source where everyone that would come to this specific place and see the recent news of Soul Society, as then Ichigo would kind of leak everything in a sense through this media source, as everyone would realize the captain of the Gotei 13 wasn't as noble as everyone thought. So now Mayuri, would be angered. He'd be reacting to this in his office, and Ichigo would be watching from just close by, right? As then he would have his mask on, right? As then he would put on a pair of glasses, right? They make someone glasses are pretty good. They make someone as evil as Aizen look innocent, right? And this is what Ichigo does. Not because of that specifically, it's kind of what the Riddler wears, right, over his mask. As not that he needs glasses, alright? I don't have to say this, but he would then wait a few minutes, as then he came in, right? He would come, behind Mayuri and slit his soul chain in soul sleep before then, slitting his throat, right? As then he would then reach in his pocket before taking a roll of tape, and he would tape his face. As then he would get a red marker before then saying, "No more lies." As obviously he had left a postcard saying, "What does a liar do when he's dead?" And then obviously the person who's investigating would answer the riddle, right? It's not really a riddle, it's a pun. But after this, Ichigo would then leave the crime scene, as he would head towards back to Orihime's bakery, right? As he would just anonymously, give the money in a sense, so and no one knows it's actually him. So he would then head back to the barracks, right? And he would then rest for the night. The next day, there'd be urgent news, right? Yamamoto and Shunsui and Okatake, they were drinking tea, and they felt Mayuri's Ryatsu just flatly disappear, right? And this meant he either just disappeared or he died. So Yamamoto, Shunsui, Okatake, they would head towards their top speed, Shunpo, right? Once they would get there, they would open the door and they would see Mayuri's body, and the tape and the how do I say, the riddle and the no more lies. As then Yamamoto would examine the body, as he would then see where he would see the cuts, right? As he would call over Unohana. So Unohana would take the body to the, a morgue in a sense, to examine it, to do an autopsy. As then she would examine the body to see this was a wound created by the Zanpakuto. So this was a Shinigami. As once Yamamoto would realize this, he'd be confused and a little scared, right? And also angered, right? He'd realize the little scared part was someone could easily assassinate Yamamoto. The angry part is, how can a Shinigami kill his own? Then the confused part is, who would do this, right? They would need to find motive, and there's so many people that would kill Mayuri, right? As then they would start questioning around people who were Mayuri's enemies, and obviously they came up with Squad. Obviously, this would be Ichigo's first murder, and everyone can see his MO now, right? They don't know it's Ichigo though, right? So next person would be he would try to murder all of the Sonoyushiro clan. So instead of the hit that Tokinada had to do on himself, right, in which Hikone had to kill the assassin, it would be Ichigo himself. Ichigo would be watching from afar, as he had hired a boy to go to the door and offer booze, so they can lower the guards. So all the guards would be drinking booze. Their reflexes or Ryatsu would be kind of spiked, right? the pretty much in the drink, it would affect the Ryatsu, so they couldn't use it, right? So Ichigo would then flash step inside as he would start cutting down everyone, as he had practically avenged his family at that point. As he would then use his tape on practically everyone, doing the no more lies, as then he would start using the clue, right? The clue being like, bring the rat under the light, and specifically this is the person who's going to be investigating this, and we'll do that in a few minutes here. So he would then say, bring the rat into the light and you'll find me. Obviously there would be I'm kind of trying to do some similarities here to the Riddler, but there'd be no reason to have the El Radala thing and the URL website, because there's no such thing as technology here, so it wouldn't make sense, right? So after this, the next morning, everyone would notice as obviously later that evening or afternoon-ish, Tokinada would be made the head of the clan, and this is what Ichigo wanted. This is what Aizen advised Ichigo to do. Advised, he didn't force him, so, or like to order him to do it. It's just an advisement, right? So, which Ichigo takes because he respects Aizen. As then Byakuya would investigate the scene. Byakuya is now sort of the main investigator in this, right? As he would recognize this is possibly 30-50 dead Sanaishos. Ichigo went from killing just one person to killing officially now 51 people. Ichigo was now tagged as the Riddler throughout the Soul Society. As Byakuya was investigating, he looked at the clue and he realized a while back Asashiro Soya had went to Central 46 advising a plan, and he had to dig through. He wasn't alive at the time. He was or he was just a kid. He had learned that Asashiro Soya had found a way to make it so hollows or souls don't turn into hollows. At first, the Central 46, they pretty much allowed this as some sort of joke, because they knew they kind of guessed that Asashiro wouldn't be able to do this, right? And this was wrong. This was severely wrong. And when they realized this, they all ratted on him, right? They had evidence. They had all this, right? And they had witnesses. And they practically turned him in, right? These people are the rats. And from then, their status had been risen so high that only people like the Sanaishiros and the Zero Squad could actually equal up. Also, the head captain, right? Obviously, the only other circumstance would be all the the captains would have to, like, whenever it came to a decision, right? Central 46 says do this, but if all the captains agreed that they shouldn't do that, they could they could veto it in a sense, right? Think of the Gote 13 like the Senate and the House of Representatives, right? Pretty simple analogy. So, and so Byakuya realized the next target is Central 46, as they would put Shinigami everywhere, every corner, as Byakuya would be investigating, right? So then they would go to the funeral of Mayuri, right, and all the dead Sanaishiros. Once they would be there, Ichigo would go there in person, as Byakuya would meet with the head of the Central 46, a judge, right, the same judge that later on sentenced Aizen to 20,000 years and Muken, right? So he would meet him. They would discuss with the other, obviously the Yushiro's Yoruichi's brother would be there, and Tokinada would be there. Same with Kukaku, obviously, because everyone kind of but not actually. I don't think much people respected the Sanaisha. That was bad wording. Everyone knew them. They were very elevated in the social status. So what would happen is Ichigo would then appear there, right? He would kind of do something similar when it came to the attack, but it wouldn't be like actual like a bomb. It would be sort of like a keto technique, right? And you're running who is the target. So recently, that morning, or not morning, but evening, one of the members of the Kuchiki clan had went missing, right? As then Ichigo thought he wasn't gonna. People thought he was gunning for Central 46, not for the other clans. So this was alright. He would gun for Ginrei's. How do I say? Ginrei had another student, right? Who like he taught Koga, right? Koga Kuchiki, but he also taught another person, right? And he gave this person whatever name. This person is just a figurehead, the way to develop the story, how Ichigo works under a noble but secretly hates them in a sense. So Ichigo would sort of put like a Aikido technique on him, just the one he made specifically for the situation, right? It would be sort of like a bead, and he would stick it onto the back of his neck per se, right? And as Ichigo would tell the man, hey, he's threatening it, right? I will detonate this in your head, will fly off your body, He basically threatened to kill him, right? As he would tell him to basically go into the funeral and threaten, like not threaten, but tell, like kind of cause a scene, right? Everyone realized this was the Riddler. As what would happen is Ichigo would make a clone of himself, obviously with tips from Aizen. As then he would make a clone of himself before then holding the person, kind of telling everyone that he'll blow this whole place up if he doesn't see Byakuya Kuchiki, right? As obviously, not he doesn't see Byakuya Kuchiki, but Byakuya Kuchiki would appear as he's the main person. He sees this as the Riddler, right? The person who had been terrorizing and practically a serial killer, right? So he would then, Byakuya would approach Ichigo as, all of the kind of the Kido Corp would be there, or Squad 5 specifically, because the Kido Corp merged with Squad 5 after the incident. So the Kido Corp would be ready to put up shields to protect everyone, right? Or they kind of were already. They took Bakudo 81, right? Bakudo 81 Danku, and used it as a sort of shield to protect everyone, and it was pretty good. So Byakuya goes in, right? As he looks at Ichigo, as he would then say, "So you're the Riddler, huh? You're the one killing all these people?" As then Ichigo then say, "I mean, they deserved it, right? Mayuri, he experimented on Quincy's and experimented on other people, even his own men. Obviously his voice had been distorted, and he would then say the Sona Yishiros who had killed Ishin, Shiba, and Masaki Kurosaki, right? And he would then name a bunch of other assassinations and regime changes, right? And he was also bring out the Central 46 and how they framed Asashiro Soya. Yamamoto, he wouldn't be there, but he would, I guess after this event, he would realize what Ichigo was saying, and he realized Ichigo had a lot on them. He had to have some inside person to realize this much, right? So now Ichigo, he has a person hostage, and he tells him, I'll let you go if you answer these 3 riddles. As he would then say, what is a thing that, what is the thing, he's basically given the riddle about justice, right? He says, what is the thing fuck. Actually, I don't know why I can't remember. Give me a second here. It's kind of unprofessional of me not know the riddle on spot, but I'm gonna go find it. Alright, I shouldn't have paused there. I probably will cut it out, but pretty much what he will then say is the riddle, right? The first one is, the person will be shaking, say, of course, I'll answer it. As then he would then say, it can be cruel, poetic, or blind, but when it is denied, it is violence you may find. As Byakuya would then say, justice. As the person would answer, as then he would then say, good, you answered the first one. The next one is, obviously, then he would then, explain the second one being, since your justice is so select, please tell us which vermin you're paid to protect. Obviously, this would be the Central 46, right? Or specifically the rats, right? Ichigo sees Central 46 as the rat, right? He even left a clue saying like, follow the maze and you'll find the rat. Same with the, put him under the light and you'll know where I'm at. Other clues like this he left at crime scenes, right? And this explains, right? Obviously we see this person, right? He was corrupt, just like the son of Yushiro's, right? As then he would ask the question, right? Who is this person, right? As you know, he would answer another riddle, or not answer. He would ask another riddle in which it would ask, you know, who is the rat? You know, same one, right? As then he would then say, you know, no, I can't tell you. You know, obviously this would lead to him legit blowing it up, and Byakuya would be sent flying, like, just completely sent flying, I guess, into the barrier. As you know, he'd kind of be a little injured, but he had constructed his body with his Ryatsu, kind of shielding himself. Same with he also used his Shikai ability to, I guess, Shunpo out of there, right? After this, you know, Ichigo's clone would pop, as this would be the portable gi guy, as then he would leave the scene, right? As it was sort of like the portable gi guy, since nobody knew about the portable gi guy except Urahara himself. It was just a replica in a sense, right? Ichigo would leave the scene, as then he was told that the head of the Central 46 was being escorted about a week from now, right? As he'd be waiting there with a sort of invention he was given from Aizen, right? It was a sort of Kido enhanced weapon. It was like a sniper, but made from Kido itself. And this is something Aizen had made just for Ichigo, right? Just so he can help Ichigo, I guess, get his justice, per se, right? This was the day Aizen had chose to actually betray Soul Society, right? He would leave a letter in his room after faking his death, and earlier that week he did fake his death. Afterwards, he had a letter, right? It was the amount of defense Kido he put on that was unbelievable, right? It would take the whole week for them to decipher the Kido, right? Once he would decipher it, it would be the day of, right? The Central 46 judges were being escorted, as then Ichigo would be at a building a few blocks away, or block away per se, right? As then they would, then Ichigo would be looking through the scope as he would flashback, right? He was talking to Orihime, as then obviously he kind of not slipped up, but he would tell Orihime he was like the Riddler, right? Obviously, I guess usually some people would just freak out by that fact, but like, it would kind of be different here, as we know, because it's like, it's fiction, so there has to be like one person who would be like, you know, I don't care if you're the Riddler or some shit. Not the Riddler, just an example, but I don't care like who you are, you know, like your character, your personality is just like better in a sense. It's kind of hard to explain. So now, in a sense, this would kind of lead Orihime into like his crimes, I guess, aiding and abetting in a sense, but that's just like a far-fetched, you know. But Ichigo would be looking through, right? As then it was about evening, right? The head of the judge was standing in front of under the light, right? As then Byakuya and the rest of the captains, just a few other captains, Soifon, Byakuya, and Shunsui were escorting them. As then Ichigo would see the person under the light, as then he would shoot, right? This would impale the person right through the head, ending them, right? As this would cause another effect, right? Ichigo would then release the bomb Kidos, Hado number 5488 he had placed there, right? As it was sort of an invention. The beads, he had about 10 of them there. As then Byakuya would tell everyone to get down, as then he would then, you know, Shunpo away before the explodes, you know, the chain effects of explosions would start going off, right? As then Ichigo would flee the scene. After Byakuya had looked up, he had seen the Riddler, as then he had realized the clue. Bring him under the light, and you'll find where I'm at, right? And then Byakuya would run towards there as he would Shunpo. As Ichigo would make it towards the cafe where Hime owns, right? As then she would have the coffee he had ordered, right, just for this specific situation. As then he was drinking it, as then all of the Shinigami would see Ichigo, right? They would start entering the building, as then they would arrest him. And these people, they were not the original Shinigami that were escorting him. These people were the Zero Squad, right? If you're wondering, why would the Zero Squad go out of their way just to arrest Ichigo? Number one, they realized who Ichigo was, right? Senjimaru was looking at Ichigo from afar, way before they had arrived secretly, right? And they were watching Ichigo from afar. They knew Ichigo was the Riddler the whole time. So Senjimaru was watching Ichigo, and he would see like he's a hybrid. Same with Owetsu, right? The Zanpakuto. He knows every Zanpakuto. He knows Ichigo killed all those people, right? Owetsu then knows him because of his names hold power, you know. So they would bust in, right? As Byakuya would be there, as they would arrest Ichigo. Owetsu would seal him with his ink, right? As then Byakuya would walk up to the table, as he would look onto the coffee. It had a question mark. As you know, Ichigo would then be arrested and sentenced to probably, I'd say, about 2,000 years in Muken. And this is pretty okay, I guess, compared to Aizen. As then right before he was escorted, he was I guess in the prison, right? Sort of in the prison, right? Aizen would suddenly appear, as he would not appear, it was sort of like a illusion in a sense, right? Only Ichigo can see. Not Kyoka Suigetsu, just Okida, right? Like sort of Bakudo number 77, Tentakura. As then he would then tell Ichigo that he's done well, and soon he'll be out of there, right? Just obviously then that would end the Kido, as Ichigo would be down in Muken, right? He'd be sealed, not sealed, his room would be sealed. As right across from him, someone would someone was there, and then he would disappear. The person would then suddenly appear, as he would then look up. He would see a man, as a woman would be behind him. This would be Asashiro Soya and his Zanpakuto Urizakuru, right? So Ichigo would recognize him, saying, "You're Asashiro Soya, aren't you?" As Asashiro would answer, saying, "Yes, I am. I saw what you did earlier these few days. You really embarrassed them. I like that." As then Ichigo would tell him, as Aizen knew Asashiro would be there and would want to ally up with Ichigo, right? He would tell Ichigo that sooner or later they were going to ascend to the Soul Palace, in which your plan will be built upon to do something way better, or way complex. As Asashiro would be glad to join, right? As obviously now we do a time skip, right? Aizen is defeated by Urahara, I guess, in a sense. I know it would be kind of a plot hole, because who's going to defeat him? But as we know, Aizen wanted to lose, so he would ascend, fuse with the Hokkyokyu, and fuse with Kyoka Suigetsu, right? As then he'd be sent down to Muken. Obviously, once he would get there, kind of a few days in, this would be around the start of the Fullbring arc, and then a few days, I don't know why I said a few days, like a few years, like 2-3 years, they would plan the things out. Ichigo would have his flood plan, right? Aizen, and right after they were going to do it, right after they had saved everyone, right? As Aizen would tell Ichigo and Asashiro that they were going to be told by, Kiraku, they need help against Yawatch, right? And this time Ichigo's not there. There's not much they can do, right? Or Hime was arrested and in the same place, since if you're aiding and abetting someone who has a 2,000-year sentence, you're most likely gonna be right there with them, right? So Ichigo, Asashiro, Orihime, and Aizen, they were planning their huge plan. Right after they had saved everyone from Yawatch, they were going to start their plan. And this is exactly what happened. Kiraku would come down, ask them for their help, and they would go up, right? They would defeat Yawatch. It seems pretty simple, since Ichigo and Aizen did that in the first part, and now they're way more powerful. Ichigo in that time had trained, got his Bankai, got mostly all of his abilities, and the fact that they're in Muken, and Aizen could possibly have Ichigo in sort of position in which they can extend their time if they needed to, like the hyperbolic time machine in a sense. That would be much doable, right? So they would pretty much beat your watch, as Ichigo would then tell Kiraku, once they were being sent back a few days later, that he had made a grave mistake asking them for his help. Then Ichigo would snap his fingers before a set of explosions would occur, right? As then all of Soul Society would start being flooded, sort of like the Ark of Noah, right? In a sense, it's just a comparison, a small comparison, right? So all of Soul Society would be flooded, and now this was their way to ascend, right? Aizen would then release his Kyoka Suigetsu as they would see their illusion, right? They were under illusion, as suddenly they would be cut down, or they were already cut down, but since they're the illusion, they didn't realize that, right? As this was kind of end this series, right? Ichigo and Aizen would become Soul King, and they were sort of like the subordinates, the close subordinates. And as you know, Aizen killed Gin because he betrayed Aizen, right? And Tozen still lives, and obviously Aizen and Asashiro live in the royal palace as sort of like the Zero Squad in a sense. They didn't have much trouble because Aizen can constantly evolve and come back to life, and not constantly evolve, but in a sense he does that have that from the chair he was sealed in. And same with Ichigo and Asashiro, they can both get stronger. They have possibly limitless potential, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Anyway, it was kind of fun doing this series. Next series shall be What If Naruto is Miuchiro's Reincarnation. So far I did 30 minutes of recording for that one, but without further ado guys, have a good day.